Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Penn Vicarage on this Thursday morning. Lovely to see you. Thank you for joining us for our Bible talk this morning. I hope you're well and cheerful, and good to see you today. Our psalm this morning is Psalm 69, and it's quite a long one, so we're going to get straight into it. So fasten your seatbelts. Here we are, Psalm 69. Save me, O God, for the waters have come up to my neck. I sink in deep mire where there's no foothold. I have come into deep waters, and the flood sweeps over me. I'm weary with my crying, my throat is parched, my eyes grow dim with waiting for my God. More in number than the hairs of my head are those who hate me without cause. Many are those who would destroy me, my enemies who accuse me falsely. What did I steal must I now restore? O God, you know my folly, the wrongs I've done are not hidden from you. Do not let those who hope in you be put to shame because of me, O Lord God of hosts. Do not let those who seek you be dishonoured because of me, O God of Israel. It's for your sake that I've borne reproach. The shame has covered my face. I've become a stranger to my kindred, an alien to my mother's children. It's zeal for your house that has consumed me. The insults of those who insult you have fallen on me. When I humbled my soul with fasting, they insulted me for doing so. When I made sackcloth my clothing, I became a byword to them. I'm the subject of gossip for those who sit in the gate, and the drunkards make songs about me. But as for me, my prayer is to you, O God. At an acceptable time, O God, in the abundance of your steadfast love, answer me. With your faithful help, rescue me from sinking in the mire. Let me be delivered from my enemies and from the deep waters. Do not let the flood sweep over me, or the deep swallow me up, or the pit close its mouth over me. Answer me, O Lord, for your steadfast love is good. According to your abundant mercy, turn to me. Do not hide your face from your servant. I'm in distress, make haste to answer me. Draw near to me, redeem me, set me free because of my enemies. You know the insults I receive and my shame and dishonour. My foes are all known to you. Insults have broken my heart, so I'm in despair. I looked for pity, but there was none, and for comforters, but I found none. They gave me poison for food, and for my thirst they gave me vinegar to drink. Let their table be a trap for them, a snare for their allies. Let their eyes be darkened so they cannot see, and make their loins tremble continually. Pour out your indignation upon them, and let your burning anger overtake them. May their camp be a desolation. Let no one live in their tents, for they persecute those whom you struck down, and those whom you wounded they attack more. Add guilt to their guilt. May they have no acquittal from you. Let them be blotted out of the book of the living. Let them not be enrolled among the righteous. But I am lowly and in pain. Let your salvation, O God, protect me. I will praise the name of God with a song. I will magnify him with thanksgiving. This will please the Lord more than an ox, or a bull with horns and hooves. Let the oppressed see it and be glad. You who seek God, let your hearts revive, for the Lord hears the needy, and does not despise his own that are in bonds. Let heaven and earth praise him, the seas and everything that moves in them. For God will save Zion, and rebuild the cities of Judah, and his servants shall live there and possess it. The children of his servants shall inherit it, and those who love his name shall live in it. And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Okay, very different to the psalm of the last few days. Firstly, who wrote it? Now, it says in the italics at the beginning, it's only in the italics, that it's a psalm of David. Many people are not quite sure about this. They think because it mentions Judah at the end, the split between Judah and Israel happened under David's grandson, a particularly unwise and foolish man by the name of Rehoboam. And under his reign, the kingdom split into Israel and Judah. So it's thought that it could be later. There's quite a lot of thoughts, this line of thinking, that it actually came from a king called Hezekiah rather later. You can read about Hezekiah if you want to at your leisure in Isaiah 36 to 39, and also in 1 Kings chapter 18 verse 13 is a time when Hezekiah was in quite a lot of trouble. So there's quite a lot of thought, although it says it in the italics at the beginning that it was to David, that it might well actually have been one of David's offspring, Hezekiah, a few years later. So, what's going on in this psalm? And if you want to structure it out, it's clearly in sort of bite-sized chunks. You can see it in sort of 3 or 4 verses at a time. What you've got here, quite obviously, is whoever it is, be it Hezekiah, Day, whoever it may be, you've got somebody in a lot of trouble. This person is, as I say, in trouble, and really real dire straits, you might say. Firstly, and they're not just that, they use very strong language to illustrate the fact that they're in dire trouble too. So they talk about using words like a deep mire, there's no foothold, deep waters, weary with my cry, my throat is parched. Later he talks about despair and dishonour and things like that as well. So as I say, the guy's in real trouble and he uses very strong language to illustrate the fact that he is in a lot of trouble. So the language is quite poetic, but he's basically expressing with his heart as well as his head that he's in real trouble. He's also absolutely convinced that he's innocent of the charge against him. He acknowledges in verse 5 that he is a sinner. Of course he is. But despite all that, he clearly believes he's innocent of the charges that have been laid against him. So whatever insults have been poured on him, whatever the drunkards may be singing about him in the gate, I like that, whatever's going on for him, he's clearly convinced that he's innocent of the charge that is against him. What's more, he's also convinced that he's received these dishonours, these insults, because of his commitment to God. It's zeal for your house, he says, has consumed me. So it's clearly his holiness, it's his love for God that he believes has got him into this kind of trouble. He's experienced huge amounts of shame and dishonour and disgrace. And what's more, he feels there's no one to comfort him either. So he talks about, he looked for comfort. In verse 20, he says, I looked for comforters, but I found none. So here's a description using strong and poetic and heartfelt language of a guy who's in real doo-doo, okay? He feels as though he's in real trouble, he's in desperate straits, and he brings this situation before God. That's quite clear. Now, for the eagle-eared amongst you, you may have heard various phrases in there that might ring true with some bits of the Gospels, especially to do with the passion and the last few hours of the life of Jesus. Now, if you are that's for the eagle-eared, if eagles have ears, amongst you, you might recognise various phrases from the New Testament. So, for example, in verses 4 and 5, he talks about they hated me without cause. So the writer of the Psalm says. In John and chapter 15, verse 25, at the Last Supper, when Jesus is talking about what's going to happen to him, verses John 15:25, Jesus uses the same phrase about himself. Okay, so that's one of them. Not just that, the phrase in verse 9, he says, "Zeal for your house has consumed me." Now that phrase was used by the gospel writers when Jesus cleared the temple, when Jesus, cleared the market people out of the temple. When Jesus clearly gets very angry about what's happening in the temple, the word he uses here, the gospel writers say, zeal for your house to consume you. That's where it comes from there. And not just that, of course, the one you may recognise most of all is in verse 21. He talks about being given vinegar to drink. And that reminds us when Jesus hung on the cross, he said, I thirst, and they gave him vinegar to drink. So the eagle-eared amongst you may have noticed that there's bits of New Testament in there as well. I'm illustrating the point that the Christian church has, from the very early stages, seen Psalm 69, the fate, if you like, of Psalm, the situation of Psalm 69 has been quite akin to that of Jesus in the last few hours of his life. And so, if you recognise those, that's where you recognise them from. There is, however, one huge difference between Psalm 69 and what happened to Jesus. And it is that later on in the psalm, verses 22 to 29, the psalmist is so upset he calls down a curse on those giving him trouble. So, may their trouble be a trap for them, a snare for their own lives. Add guilt to their guilt. May they have no acquittal, and so on and so on and so on. And that's very different to Jesus, of course, who, when they pinned the nails into his hands on the cross, said, "Father, forgive them, and for they know not what they do." And actually, Stephen, the first Christian martyr in Acts, I think it's chapter 7, the death of Stephen, the first Christian martyr, said something similar. So there's the difference between Psalm 69 and what the New Testament martyrs say, and Jesus and Stephen and so on, which is all about forgiving your enemies and loving those who hate you. So what are we to do with words like this? Because from some Bibles and some prayer books and so on have these bits like this, have them sort of italiced out or have them sort of in brackets so you can miss them out. Well, I believe very strongly that we actually need to keep them in. So why? Why, when we're supposed to forgive our enemies, why do we leave bits of this in? Well, firstly, I believe, for however much it may be difficult for us to accept, actually, let's be honest, we all feel like that sometimes. And the fact is that when people treat us badly, whether we like it or not, if we're honest with ourselves, that's sometimes how we feel. And I think actually if we're honest about where we're at, to some extent we can deal with it. And so I think to some extent keeping the verse in, because actually it reminds us of the kind of human nature. That's how we do often feel sometimes when people treat us badly, when we see people treating other people badly and so on. We can feel like this. Secondly, I think it's actually right to enunciate it, especially in the presence of God, because actually enunciating it, often just getting it off our chest, makes us feel better in itself. But also, I found in my experience that prayer is not just about getting God to change things so I like it better, but it's also about asking God to change me. So actually, if I feel like wanting God to pour boiling oil on someone's head or whatever, if I say that to God, actually, it does allow God to, by expressing my feelings and my thoughts, it actually it opens me to allowing God to change me and to soften me. And I found that many times over the years, that if I've expressed these feelings before God openly, actually God changes me and I become a much less vengeful person because of it. And finally, actually, having here's a good word, juxtaposition of what the psalmist did and what David did demonstrates really well what the cross does, actually. That the cross of Jesus has made a difference. That the cross of Jesus and what Jesus did is an example to us. And actually reminds us that the cross of Jesus actually does put power into our lives so that actually we can be better. That he can deal with that revenge in our hearts. And actually the cross of Jesus soaks that up. And actually it demonstrates the difference between what happened in the Old Testament and actually what happens in the New. That the change that Jesus brings through the cross does transform our lives and the way we think about things, the way we think about people. So, 3 things in the psalm. Firstly, this morning, we've clearly got an example, a description of somebody who's in serious trouble. Secondly, you've got lots of parallels here with Jesus in the fact that Jesus was unjustly tried and killed and so on and so on. And the despair that Jesus felt is very much what the Psalm 69 felt as well. But finally, I think it's important to keep these words in and actually let these words be an example to us so that we can bring our situations and our feelings, good, bad, and ugly, before God, that we can be honest with God, that our prayers can actually change us, and that the juxtaposition of what Psalm 69 did and what Jesus did on the cross can be an example to us and demonstrate what the cross does to us. Bless you, friends.